Hello, my name is Janet Montgomery, and I am a clinical associate professor at the University of Maryland, and I will be speaking to you about what music teachers should know about students with disabilities. A school psychologist was orally administering an IQ test to a 9-year-old boy. He said to the boy as he pointed to the picture of ducks, "If this is the first duck and this is the second duck, what do we call this duck?" pointing to the third duck. The boy paused and then replied, "I'm not sure, but I think it's a mallard." Do you think the boy's answer was correct? Was it creative? Would you like to be a music teacher of that boy? Maybe. My purpose is to speak to you about the enjoyment of teaching students with disabilities when you use appropriate adaptations for their learning. Perhaps you'll be surprised by my final recommendation. I'm sure you've heard of the acronym IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. IDEA refers to a law that Congress passed over 40 years ago and has amended several times, most recently in 2011. You probably already know that this law was passed to provide all students in the U.S. with a right to a free, appropriate public education. How many million students do you think are being served under this law? More than 6.4 million students in the U.S. That's 13% of the school population. So will you be teaching some special learners? Yes, most likely. A major cornerstone of IDEA is that each student is to be educated in the least restrictive environment. This term means that each student should be educated with his or her non-disabled peers to the greatest extent that's appropriate. Each student should have access to the same education as his or her peers, so the word appropriate is most important. Who decides the definition of appropriate? A team of people who work with the individual student. It could be teachers, other professionals such as a school psychologist, occupational therapist, speech clinician, and also the parents. Sometimes the most appropriate setting for learning is the regular classroom, or part-time in the regular classroom and part-time in a special classroom. But if a student can't achieve goals set for him or her in one of these settings, then the least restrictive environment may be a special education classroom full-time, or depending on the severity of the disability or medical condition, the least restrictive environment may be a special school or even a hospital. This team of people develop an IEP for each student with disabilities. Music teachers are allowed, in fact required by law, to read a student's IEP to be aware of his or her strengths and weaknesses as well as the learning goals. So what's our goal as music teachers? We want to provide special learners with an equal opportunity to experience the expressive qualities of music. We want to help them increase their knowledge of music, their skills in music, and their valuing of music. How? By engaging in the 3 artistic processes: create, perform, and respond. In your career, it's very likely that you will teach many students with special needs to create, perform, and respond. Now you might wonder, should I know about the student's specific disability as a label? IDEA lists 13 different labels for students with disability, and in alphabetical order it begins with autism and it ends with visual impairment. Another approach, however, is recommended by Hamill and Horrigan in a 2011 publication, and theirs is called the labels-free approach. This approach lists 5 domains of disabilities: cognition, communication, behavioral or emotional challenges, sensory challenges, and physical or medical conditions. An even simpler approach might be just to think about the 3 types of human development: physical and intellectual and emotional. Let's think through some common sense adaptations. First scene. The 3rd grade class is learning to play the recorder. For a 3rd grade student without fingers on her right hand, you might put tape over the right hand holes on a recorder so she could play BAG. Or you might decide to have her play bells rather than a recorder. Either way, she can still make music alongside her peers. Scene 2. Have you ever seen a student walk into a music room and cover his ears? For a student who's extremely sensitive to sound, perhaps the student could wear regular headphones to mask some of the sound. Next scene. What is an alternative way to explain a rhythmic pattern written in musical notation? For a student who just doesn't understand your mathematical explanation of that rhythm, you may want to show the rhythmic relationships of that pattern with magnetic icons, and then transfer it to notation. Last scene. You've asked your 6th grade band students to work together in small groups to create a 4-bar composition using the syncopated rhythm that occurs throughout one of their band pieces. For a student with emotional challenges who doesn't work well in a small group, you may ask her to work with another student, and you may carefully structure the task so that the 2 students together can more easily achieve the goal of composition. So, whether you use the 13 labels, or the 5 domains, or the 3 types of development, the most important information is what you know about the individual student's learning needs. This information will help you develop some good and hopefully appropriate teaching and learning strategies. I'm sure in your career you will use many different strategies to meet the needs of all your students, including those with disabilities. So how about a quick quiz? I've listed 5 statements that I'd like you to analyze. So you're going to ask yourself, is this statement for teaching special learners, or is this statement for teaching all learners? Number 1, design multiple ways to present musical ideas. Special learners or all learners? 2, find multiple ways for students to show their musicianship. 3, demonstrate tasks and sequence them in small steps from sound to symbol, such as echo clap, echo say, echo play, and then move to musical notation. 4, choose age-appropriate and high-interest musical materials. 5, be involved with other educators and parents regarding a student's placement, least restrictive environment, and learning goals. So how did you do? All 5 could be for all learners. Only the last statement implies special learners because of that mention of the least restrictive environment. So, as you go through your methods and techniques classes, think about adaptations you might use for a student with disabilities. As you get to know all your students as individuals, you'll better understand their learning needs and their special quirks. Think of the boy in the mallard. His answer was recorded as wrong, but I enjoyed his comment, didn't you? I have enjoyed teaching many students with disabilities, both in regular classrooms and self-contained classes. I hope you will too. So my closing recommendation should come as no surprise. Remember, good teaching for students with disabilities makes good teaching for everyone.